What's up, everybody? My name is Andrew Saitek, and well, hold that thought for just a second. I think I saw something about that. Yeah, stop doing that Peter McKinnon intro thing. Yeah, I should probably take another look at that. I definitely should try to develop like my own unique brand, right? Let's see if we can't let's try and do a new intro right now. What's up, fam? It's your boy Andrew. No, let's try and make something a bit more chill. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad that you're able to make it to the tutorial today. No, that doesn't fit my personality. Let's add a little bit more personality to that. So something like, howdy y'all. So let's just skip all that and we'll go straight to the intro, all right? Alright, so let's get right into this tutorial today. Today we're going to be looking at linear and radial gradient filters and exactly how they're useful to your editing process. So what exactly would you use gradients for? Personally, I would use them for one of two things: to correct your image or to stylize your image. And we're going to be looking at both those today. So today, let's start off with linear gradient filters. This photo right here of Nicole, I have already applied a linear gradient, which as you can see, it just corrects for the overexposure that the sign is casting a shadow over them. To show you exactly how I'd approach this photo to correct it, I'm just going to come down here and duplicate this photo. And I'm going to reset the edit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, I'm going to copy and paste this edit. This will apply everything except for the linear gradient, which I'm about to show you. So to start off, you can either come over here to the right hand toolbar and click on this rectangle, which shows the linear gradient itself, or you can push the letter L on your keyboard. And so next, you're going to take your mouse, you're going to click and drag, and you want it to be fairly long, something along that line would probably be good. You just got to feel it out when you first start. And I'm going to drag it right around here. So as you can see, there are a lot of different settings you can adjust here. You can adjust the white balance, the lighting, different effects, and then also a few other things down here. But to be honest, for mostly my concern, I usually just worry about the white balance and the lighting. When we look at this photo, the white balance looks good. The white balance is pretty uniform through the whole photo. Don't need to really worry about that. It's just the lighting I'm concerned about. So let's come over here to the exposure. I'm just going to go negative. Let's try negative 0.4. And that's already looking a lot better right there. But because it was overexposed, let's look at the highlight. The highlights, I'm going to try to bring it down to negative 55. And see, I'm liking that. I can actually probably just go a little bit higher on that. So like negative 75. And I'm going to bring this back up to negative 0.2. I'm not negative 0.3. And that really just brings back a whole another dynamic to this photo. When you remove it, you can see that the top of her head is really overexposed and just doesn't look very well. Once you add it back, it corrects the image and it looks really good now. Over here in Joe and Gia's set, I actually have a photo that works really well with just being able to use these linear gradients to stylize your photo, which is this photo right here. And as you can see, I have 4 linear gradients here. They're all used to kind of play around with the brightness and a little bit of the color to try and emphasize the photo. So if I were to remove all these, you can see how it's changed a little bit. You can see I put a little bit of a gradient along the entire image now. I've made it a little bit darker down by their feet and faded it all the way up to a bright white at the top to make it kind of look like it's fading right into the clouds. And so with this image, let's do the same thing as we did with Nicole's. We're gonna just basically come down here, we're gonna duplicate this image, and then we're gonna come over here and reset it. Which also, if you didn't know, you can also just do Shift R, and Shift R will automatically reset your image of all the edits. So let's come over here, we're going to copy and paste it just like Nicole's. And so now we have our image without any linear gradients on it. So next what I do is, if I don't have it already open, I'm going to push L on the keyboard, but I already do. So we're going to start off with the sky. And so we're going to want to click and drag. And so with this, I don't want to affect them, so I'm going to turn it to just to where it doesn't affect Joe over here. I'm going to drag it down to right around there, and if you do want to see exactly what it's affecting, you can just hold your mouse over it, and the red is what it is affecting, and it's going to slowly fade out to nothing. Where you can see the original image, that's what's not being affected currently. And I'm just going to boost the exposure up to let's do 0.3, because we're going to add a mirrored linear gradient on the other side. So we're gonna do 0.3, and let's boost the highlights up to, let's try like 25. No, too much. Let's try 10. And for this one, let's bring the temperature up to 15. Now this is gonna be a bit too much, so let's try 10. Now that we already have our settings set, we can actually click and drag on the other side, and it'll do the same exact settings right on the other side. And we're gonna do the same thing, trying to keep Gia out of this filter as well. And boom, that's already looking a lot better right there. If I were to delete both of these, you can see already what we're doing here. We're just trying to make it fade to a bright white up at the top. Let's do something similar for the bottom though. We're gonna fade it down to a darker color. What I'm gonna try to do is I'm gonna try to follow these leading lines right here. And so we're gonna drag up and we're gonna try to match the slant of these leading lines. And now we're going to go -0.2. Now we can go heavier. Let's do -0.6 and bring these highlights back down to 0. And we'll do -30. Now let's try -55 for the shadows. Bring some of those shadows back. We're gonna go maybe even -1. For the temperature, I usually like my shadows, I like to add a little bit of blues. My highlights, I like to add a little bit of oranges to kind of stylize the image a little bit. So let's go -20. No, that's too heavy. So let's do -12. And then, so let's click and drag for the other side as well. Something like that. We can make this a little bit more dramatic because these ones aren't overlapping, so they're not gonna add to each other. But the one thing that you will want to watch out for though is where these two gradients cross in the middle, because we will have a little bit of overlap here, but since it's so subtle, it's nothing that I'm really too concerned about. So there we go. We already have this photo stylized. Nothing too crazy, but a little bit of a dramatic add to it. So that's how you use linear gradients to either correct or stylize your images. Next, let's talk about radial gradients, which are very similar to linear gradients, except they span out in a circle versus a line. As you can see, I already have a radial gradient right here, which is very feathered out, as you can see with the red. And really, this is just kind of correct the image and put a little bit more emphasis on our subjects here. If we were to delete this, you can see how much brighter the edges are. I want to kind of focus the eye in on the center of the image, so that's what I did, was I took a radial gradient and darkened the edges, kind of like a vignetting. So now let's take this image and we're gonna duplicate it and do the same thing. We're gonna do Shift R, we're gonna reset the entire image, and we're gonna come over here, copy and paste the edit onto this one. Now that we have our edit, we're gonna hit the letter R on our keyboard and we're gonna see about how we can really try to correct or emphasize this image. Now that we have our edit, we're gonna use the radial gradient to correct the edges and really try to put emphasis on Gia and Joe right here. So now let's take our cursor into the middle of the screen, we're gonna pull it out and we're going to drag it all the way around them. Since we're trying to put a little bit more emphasis on them, we're going to put, say, -0.8. We can do even heavier than that. Let's do -1.2, and then we're going to try and take the highlights down to -55, maybe even pull the shadows down a little bit, -45. Now we're going to try and do a little bit more subtle on the shadows, -20. So that brings back a lot of the detail on the sides and puts a lot more of the emphasis on the subjects in the middle of the screen. And actually, I kind of want this even darker on the edges. Let's try a -1.6. I really like that. I really want to put as much emphasis as I can on them themselves versus the edges of the photo, which, as you can see now, if I delete it and then put it back on, you can see how much emphasis it adds to this photo. Next, let's go back to Nicole's shoot, which we have the shot of her and her dog, and we'll do the same thing. We're going to duplicate this and reset it, and we're going to copy and paste the settings onto it. So same thing, a little bit more for stylizing purposes. I'm going to use a radial gradient right here. Let's pull this out. We're going to do let's do -0.8. Yeah, let's do -0.8. We're going to do probably -20. No, let's do -15. And so now what we're gonna do here, because it's a little too dark right towards them, I'm gonna change the feathering option. I'm gonna pull it out. And as you can see, if I were to pull it all the way out, it'd just be an exact ellipse. If I were to pull it all the way in, it would fade all the way to the center point of the ellipse. So I wanna just bring this out too. Let's try, see, I can see the edges right here. I wanna try and bring this out to where you can just barely see it. So let's try 20. I can still see it a little bit on the brick paper, so let's try and do 30. I think that looks really good right there. We're even gonna pull this up just a little bit so make sure I don't get any of the darkness on her face. And that right there looks really good too. So now before and after, I really like that a lot. So now let's try and do a little bit of an ultimate test. We're gonna come back over here to Joe and Gia's shoot. This image right here, I really like this one a lot. We did a top-down angle of them laying on the ground, and I was able to use both linear and radial gradients to really stylize and emphasize this photo. As you can see, I have a radial gradient right here in the middle, and what this does is it really just darkens the edges, adds a bit of a vignette to it, and puts a lot more emphasis on their faces. But so with the linear gradients, you're able to see that I have one up top here that affects above them, and then one down here which affects below them. And so with this up here, it looks a lot like the sun is kind of beaming down on them and it's kind of casting a shadow of gold now. So let's just jump right into this one and we'll see what we can do. So let's duplicate the photo. We're gonna reset it. And so this is what we're starting with. We're gonna copy it and paste the edit, which it's already looking really good. But now it's awesome, but there's not much emphasis on them. So we're gonna come here, we're gonna take a radial gradient and we're gonna first pull this one out so that we can put the natural vignetting around the edge. And let's do -1. Okay, we can do even a little bit heavier. Let's do -1.5. Okay, too far, let's do -1.2. And then what we'll do is we're gonna bring down the shadows to -45, and we're going to feather this one in to around 50. We can do even 75. Let's play around with the effects a little bit. We have texture, clarity, dehaze, hue, saturation, sharpness, noise, moire, different. I'll be completely honest with you guys, I don't use most of these ones down here, but I am going to try to do it just for the video's sake. Let's take the sharpness and we're going to put it to -35. Yeah, I like that. Let's try and make it a little more subtle, so -25. And we're seeing a lot of it right over here. A little bit in the grass, but not much. So now that we have a radial gradient, let's switch that off. We're going to take our linear gradients back out by pushing L on the keyboard. What I like to do is try and add in a little bit more towards the warm side or the cool side in the gradients if I can. So how this is the less dominant side and this is towards the bottom, I'm gonna click down here and drag and I'm gonna add a cooler filter down here. And so we can even bring this up a little bit. So now let's bring the temperature down. Let's try -20. And so see how that brings a little bit of a cooler look to his arm. I like that. And we can even try and add a little bit of greens too. Let's try -25. And next we're gonna bring the exposure down a little bit. Let's try -0.4, do -0.3, and then we're going to bring down the shadows too, so -25. But I do want to try and emphasize the colors a bit more. So let's try -50. So I like that. We can see a little bit more defined blue down here. And then let's do something up top here. I'm gonna bring it right around there. And then same thing, we're gonna take it to the brighter side now, to where you can really see the golden hour look to it. Try 75. And then we'll bring this over to, let's try 75 too. So now you're really starting to see the golden hour look. But let's tone down the yellows a little bit. Let's bring it down to like 45. And what we'll do now is we're gonna brighten this side up a little. We're gonna do 0.2. But let's keep the shadows in there just to keep the contrast. We're gonna try and bring this back down to like let's try -40, but we'll brighten this up a little bit to bring up the overall exposure. On top, that will add a little bit of contrast too. So see, now we're already looking really good with this. I really like how the top of the photo, it has that golden hour look to it, and it almost looks like the sun is casting a shadow down on them. It's a little bit darker on the bottom. And then along the lines of the radial filter, that just adds an overall darkening effect to the whole image and makes it look a lot more dramatic. But yeah, so that's just about everything there is to know about the linear and radial gradients. So that's about everything for today. I'll make sure to get you guys another Lightroom lesson as soon as I can. If there's anything specifically you guys want me to teach you guys, leave it down in the comments below and I'll make sure to make a lesson about it as soon as I possibly can. But until next time guys, I'll see you guys later.